Olivia had always prided herself on being the perfect wife. At 32, she balanced her career as a successful graphic designer with raising 2 children, an 8-year-old daughter and a 6-year-old son. Her husband, Ethan, was a dedicated accountant, working long hours to provide for their family. They had built a stable life together, but the spark that had once ignited their relationship had long since faded. They had become accustomed to the rhythms of daily life: grocery runs, school pickups, family dinners, and romance felt like an afterthought. Olivia loved Ethan, but something deep within her felt empty. She longed for the connection and excitement she hadn't felt in years. She often found herself daydreaming about what it would be like to break free from the routine, to feel something more, something alive. The subtle anxiety gnawed at her as she moved through her days, wondering if she could ever recapture the passion she had once felt, or if that part of her was lost forever. Little did she know that the arrival of a new neighbor would soon change everything, awakening a desire inside her that she hadn't realized was still there. The perfect life she had built was about to unravel in ways she couldn't imagine. As the weeks went by, Olivia found herself increasingly drawn to her neighbor, Max. He had moved in a year ago, and while their interactions had started off as friendly chats over the fence, something about him had shifted the dynamic of her otherwise predictable life. Max was different. He had an easy charm, a quiet confidence that seemed to make everything feel lighter. The way he laughed, the way he looked at her with understanding, it was as if he saw her in a way no one else did. His presence stirred something deep inside her, a forgotten part of herself that longed for attention, for connection. It was innocent at first, just casual conversations as they worked in their gardens or bumped into each other at the mailbox. But soon, these moments became something more. Olivia would find herself lingering, hoping for one more laugh, one more exchange. The guilt she felt was there, lurking in the background, but it was overshadowed by a new kind of energy that filled her, a thrill she hadn't experienced in years. The more they talked, the more alive she felt, and the more she realized that she was beginning to crave something, someone, that she had never expected. Max made her feel seen, and that feeling was intoxicating. One afternoon, while the kids played in the yard, Olivia and Max found themselves alone, and the air between them was thick with unspoken tension. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows that seemed to draw them closer together. As they talked, their conversation shifted from the mundane to something more intimate, more personal. Max shared his childhood dreams, and Olivia found herself revealing parts of her past she hadn't thought about in years. There was a familiarity in their exchange, a connection that went deeper than casual friendship. Her heart raced as she laughed at something Max said, but it wasn't just the humor, it was the way he made her feel. In that moment, she felt seen, truly seen, in a way that she hadn't felt in a long time. When the laughter died down, there was a silence between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a quiet, understanding pause. And then, as if drawn by an invisible force, they were closer. Max's hand brushed against hers, a touch that sent a shiver down her spine. Olivia's breath caught in her throat, her mind spinning with the sudden, undeniable spark between them. She should have pulled away, but she didn't. Instead she stayed, lost in the chemistry that neither of them could ignore. The days following Olivia's first kiss with Max were a blur of guilt and yearning. She felt trapped in an internal battle, caught between the life she had built with Ethan and the intoxicating allure of Max. Every glance at her husband, every touch from him, felt tainted by the secret she was hiding. At the same time, every encounter with Max left her craving more. She tried to focus on her family, on her children, on keeping up with the routines, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Max. His smile, his laugh, the way he seemed to understand her in ways no one else did. It wasn't just the physical attraction, though that was undeniable, it was the emotional connection they shared. Max made her feel alive in a way that Ethan hadn't in years. Each stolen moment with Max added weight to Olivia's guilt, but it also fueled the fire of her desire. The two worlds she was living in, her devoted wife and mother role, and the passionate affair with Max, were becoming increasingly difficult to separate. Her once structured, orderly life was starting to unravel. She felt as though she was walking a tightrope, balancing two vastly different realities, knowing that any wrong move could destroy everything she held dear. Olivia's life was becoming a fragile balancing act, a constant dance between two worlds that seemed to be spiraling further apart with each passing day. The thrill of her secret affair with Max had swept her off her feet, but with each stolen kiss, each whispered conversation, the weight of the consequences grew heavier. Her connection with Ethan, her husband of 10 years, was slipping through her fingers, and she could feel it in the silence that had settled between them. He was still kind, still attentive, but the spark they once shared had dimmed over time. She tried to focus on their family, on the kids, on the responsibilities that came with being a mother and a wife, but she couldn't shake the pull of Max. At night, when Ethan was asleep, Olivia would lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to quiet the chaos in her mind. She couldn't help but replay her interactions with Max over and over again, his touch, his smile, the way he made her feel desired and alive. Yet, every time her mind drifted back to Ethan, a rush of guilt would flood her, reminding her of the betrayal she was allowing to unfold. It was a suffocating feeling, and Olivia knew she couldn't keep living this double life. As the days passed, Olivia felt herself sinking deeper into the web of lies she had carefully spun. Each moment spent with Max felt like a dangerous escape, a temporary relief from the growing tension at home with Ethan. Their secret meetings became more frequent, each one filled with the kind of intensity that made her heart race with excitement, but also gnawed at her conscience. When she was with Max, she felt alive in a way she hadn't in years, a feeling she couldn't seem to find in her marriage anymore. But every stolen kiss, every secret glance, made her feel like she was betraying the very foundation of her life. At the same time, Olivia found herself more distant from Ethan, who continued to pour himself into his work and remained blissfully unaware of her inner turmoil. She could see the love in his eyes, but it only made her feel worse, like she was suffocating under the weight of her own actions. One evening, after a particularly charged encounter with Max, Olivia returned home to find Ethan waiting for her, looking at her with a mixture of concern and love. Her heart clenched. How much longer could she keep up the charade? How much longer could she live with this deep sense of betrayal? The walls were closing in, and Olivia knew something had to give. As the weeks passed, Olivia found herself trapped in a constant tug-of-war between her desire for Max and the life she had built with Ethan. The guilt weighed on her like a heavy cloak, suffocating her every time she looked at Ethan, who remained devoted to her despite the invisible distance growing between them. He was still the man she had once fallen in love with, but now, every kind word and tender gesture from him felt like a reminder of the betrayal she was carrying. The quiet moments they shared at home were tainted by the secret she couldn't shake. Meanwhile, Max's presence seemed to fill the void that Ethan's absence left behind. Each time they met, Olivia was consumed by a mixture of exhilaration and fear, knowing she was skating dangerously close to the edge. Their connection deepened, becoming more than just physical. It became an escape, a temporary haven from the suffocating reality of her marriage. But the deeper she fell into this forbidden relationship, the harder it became to ignore the truth. She was losing herself. One night, as Olivia stared at the reflection of her tired, conflicted self in the mirror, she realized she couldn't keep juggling both lives. The constant lies were eroding her sense of self, and she knew that, sooner or later, everything would come crashing down. The moment Olivia sat down with Maya, she could feel the weight of her choices pressing down on her chest. Maya, ever the supportive friend, listened quietly as Olivia poured her heart out, recounting the affair with Max and the deep sense of guilt that gnawed at her every day. Her words tumbled out in a rush, desperate for understanding, for absolution, or perhaps simply someone to witness the storm raging inside her. Maya's eyes softened as she listened, but Olivia could see the concern etched across her face. "You've been living in two worlds, Olivia," Maya said gently, her voice calm but firm. "And no matter how much you try to pretend, you can't escape the consequences of your actions." Olivia felt the sting of truth in her friend's words. Maya wasn't judging her, she was simply stating the reality of the situation. The secret, the lies, the hidden moments, they were all catching up with her, and Olivia had to face them, whether she was ready or not. Maya continued, "You have to choose, Olivia. What do you want for your future? And can you live with the consequences of what you've done?" For the first time, Olivia realized that she couldn't keep living in the shadows. She had to make a decision, one that would define the rest of her life. The weight of the decision Olivia had to make grew heavier with each passing day. The affair with Max had brought fleeting moments of excitement, but it also left her tangled in guilt and self-doubt. As she sat alone in the quiet of her living room, her mind raced through the conversations she'd had with Ethan, the longing looks exchanged with Max, and the moments she had stolen for herself. The once clear boundaries of her life had blurred, and she was left standing at the crossroads of her marriage and the chaos of her emotions. One evening, as Ethan came home from work, Olivia couldn't avoid the truth any longer. The strain of pretending everything was fine had worn her down. As he placed his briefcase on the kitchen counter, she could feel the unspoken tension between them, thick and suffocating. She knew the time had come to be honest, to confront the betrayal that hung between them like a dark cloud. "David, we need to talk," she whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan's eyes met hers, confusion crossing his face, but Olivia couldn't back down. The guilt had consumed her, and now it was time to face the consequences of her actions, no matter how painful. As Olivia sat across from Ethan at the kitchen table, the truth finally hung between them like a heavy weight. The house, usually filled with the chaos of their 2 young children, felt eerily quiet in the aftermath of her confession. Ethan's eyes, filled with disbelief and heartbreak, pierced her, and Olivia's heart clenched with the magnitude of her actions. Her marriage, built on years of trust and shared memories, now seemed like a fragile thing, teetering on the edge of collapse. "I never meant for this to happen," Olivia whispered, her voice cracking. "I lost myself in something I shouldn't have." Ethan didn't respond at first, his face pale, his lips pressed into a thin line. She could see the storm brewing in his eyes, the hurt, the anger, and the confusion. And Olivia understood it all. She had crossed a line, betrayed him in a way that felt unforgivable, and now there was no turning back. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again," Ethan finally spoke, his voice low and raw. The words cut through her like a knife. Olivia's heart sank, but she knew he was right. She had shattered their foundation, and now the road ahead seemed uncertain, filled with more pain than she had ever anticipated. The decision was his to make, but Olivia knew that rebuilding, if it was even possible, would take more than time. It would require honesty, effort, and a lot of healing. As the weeks wore on, Olivia felt herself sinking deeper into the consequences of her actions. Each day felt like a battle between the guilt gnawing at her soul and the faint hope that somehow, through effort and time, she could mend the broken pieces of her marriage. The laughter of their children, once a source of joy, now felt like a reminder of everything she stood to lose. Ethan's silence during their interactions only made the chasm between them feel more insurmountable. They passed each other like strangers in their own home, and every attempt Olivia made to bridge the gap seemed to fall short. One evening, after a long day of trying and failing to regain the warmth that had once defined their relationship, Olivia sat in the living room, staring at the flickering light of the TV. Her mind, overwhelmed by regret, replayed the conversations she had with Max, the longing in his eyes that had led her astray. But even as she thought of him, she knew the connection with Max was nothing more than a fleeting spark in a life filled with the comfort of routine and family. Olivia realized, with gut-wrenching clarity, that she had to take responsibility for her mistakes. She could no longer run from the truth. If she wanted to save her family, she had to start by mending herself first. But that road, she knew, would be anything but easy. As the weight of her choices pressed down on her, Olivia found herself lost in a storm of emotions. She had tried to patch things together with Ethan, but the damage seemed irreparable. Their conversations felt hollow, each word heavy with the unsaid. The guilt that hung in the air between them was suffocating, and Olivia couldn't escape the truth that she had hurt the person who had always been there for her. But despite the heartache, there was something shifting within her. After a sleepless night, she found herself sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the coffee mug in her hands, the steam rising lazily into the morning light. She had been so focused on her mistakes, on the consequences of her actions, that she had neglected the most important thing, her own healing. Olivia realized she needed to find herself again, to reclaim the parts of her that had been buried under layers of guilt and regret. She needed to face the fear of losing everything and find the courage to rebuild, not just her marriage, but herself. With a trembling resolve, she picked up the phone and called Maya, the friend who had always been a source of support. She needed to start from the beginning, to confront her feelings, face her fears, and take the first step toward rebuilding her life, not for anyone else, but for herself. Olivia's decision to confront her truth wasn't easy, but it was the first step toward healing. As she sat in front of Ethan, her heart pounded with the weight of what she was about to say. The room felt small, the silence thick with anticipation, and she could see the look of uncertainty in Ethan's eyes, a mirror of her own turmoil. This wasn't just about the affair anymore, it was about the shattered trust, the years of pretending everything was fine when deep down she was lost. With a shaky breath, Olivia finally spoke. "I've made mistakes, Ethan. I betrayed you, and I can't undo that. But I want to rebuild, to make things right, if you'll let me."
Ze wird hung in ze eer, fragile yet full of resolve.
Ethan's face softened, his pain still evident, but there was something else there too, a flicker of hope, a small opening in the wall that had grown between them. He didn't speak at first, his silence pressing on her heart, but then he nodded, slow and hesitant.
I don't know if I can forgive you, Olivia.
But maybe we can try. It wasn't a promise, but it was a chance, a fragile, precious chance to rebuild what they had lost. The road ahead would be long, but Olivia finally felt like she was no longer running from the truth. In life, we often find ourselves trapped by fear and guilt, hiding from the uncomfortable truths that threaten to unravel our reality. Olivia's story reminds us that facing the truth, no matter how painful, is the only way to find healing and rebuild trust. Relationships, whether with partners or ourselves, require honesty, communication, and vulnerability. While it may feel safer to ignore problems or live in denial, ultimately, it's the courage to confront our mistakes and work through the pain that leads to growth. Take the time to address issues head-on before they take a deeper toll on your life.